Hey, Hammond? Yeah, so, my dual blades, right? I was hunting with them earlier, and I maybe let them get down to red sharpness. Oh, the whetstone, yeah, I tried that. It didn't help. It almost made them rounder, if anything, and now I sort of have the urge to hold them backwards, even when I'm not in demon mode. Wait, you're right! Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, the main Monster Hunter series has 14 weapons. It has been this way since the 4th generation, but before that, there were less weapons. So, well, what's to say that there could never be more weapons in the future? Now, of course, when it comes to things like this, something that affects you on this large of a scale, I generally prefer the concept of a properly new weapon, something designed entirely with the current Monster Hunter playstyle in mind. But that doesn't mean that that's the only choice. No, there are 3 weapons that exist in the greater world of Monster Hunter games that have not come into any of the main entries in the series. Today I'll be talking about one of those weapons, the Tonfa, added in Monster Hunter Frontier G, and whether or not this weapon would fit if brought into the modern main series Monster Hunter games. If you guys enjoy this, I'll do the exact same thing for the other 2 weapons too. To begin then, have a look at this feat of mechanical engineering right here. This thing is not your mama's Tonfa. No, this is not any simplistic design of a stick with a small handle coming off of the side. Look at the girth of that metal rod and the cylinder surrounding it. It has one purpose: size customization. Interesting, huh? As you may guess, this is in fact a blunt weapon as far as its damage type goes, even though a number of the in-game models have spikes at the end of the weapon. That said, this weapon doesn't think about damage types the way that you and I or any other Monster Hunter player does. They're just sort of built different. Literally, Tonfas have 2 modes. One of them is built differently from the other, long and short mode, which is set by where the rod itself sits within the cylinder, almost like a mechanical version of, well, flipping a Tonfa around to have the long end in front instead of the short end. In long mode, long mode, which is the default mode, you deal blunt damage as normal, nothing unusual. However, if you switch to short mode, you still deal blunt damage, but backwards, so no. Like, literally, if the head of a monster is normally the weakest point to blunt damage and the tail of a monster is most resistant to blunt damage, then in short mode with the weapon, the tail will be the weakest and head will be the most resistant. It flips the hit zones completely. It's worth mentioning, this doesn't make you a sharp weapon, so it doesn't give you sharp hit zones. It literally flips the normal blunt weapon hit zones around, which is probably the coolest part of this weapon to me. On the surface, you might see something like that and say, it just lets you not ever really have to care about the monster's body parts. You just find where you want to stand and switch modes as much as you want, but I'd argue it's very much the opposite. Knowing that Fatalis' back leg is super safe to stand near, but super resistant to blunt damage normally, you could purposefully walk into the fight, flip into short mode, and have a field day beside the legs. But there's another step to these modes too, of course. Some of your attacks put you into the air, and in long mode you have a button that makes you come back down quickly with a slam. But in short mode, that button instead keeps you in the air longer. And in fact, short mode can stay in the air as long as it can continue hitting a monster, pretty much. Long mode also gets a charged attack at the end of its main attack combo. Tonfas also have a gauge with charging levels and a decreasing timer, sort of like longsword but with more levels and a much shorter timer. This is much more meant to be thought of like a combo meter in something like a fighting game or even a hack and slash as the meter goes up with a short timer, you know? As long as you can keep up your offensive, this won't fall off, and it just constantly keeps your damage higher if you don't stop hitting your opponent, at least in one of the hunting styles. There's hunting styles in this game. As far as more general attacks, the Tonfas are a blindingly fast weapon with aerial options and a whole aerial playstyle existing for them. You can guard while holding them, you have an attack that can parry, and there is a finishing move too called Dragon Spirit Piercing Attack. If you use it right at the start of the fight, it won't do a whole lot for you. However, while using Tonfa, if you hit a specific monster part enough times, it will have a red glow coming coming off of the part. When you use the finisher move, you pop a delayed explosion to each of these red monster parts for a big chunk of damage. If you successfully do this finisher to the head after making it glow, the monster takes KO damage from all sources to all parts for a short period of time, essentially how the Thunder Beetle works in Monster Hunter Rise. Doing this to the body of a monster restores some sharpness and gives an attack buff to hunters in close range of the monster. Doing it to the tail causes essentially a bleed effect, doing cutting damage over time to the monster in the tail part. This can cut off the tail as well, and can still be applied to a monster with a broken or unbreakable tail. Unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity to play Frontier myself, so my opinions on this are all from the standpoint of someone who's just researched this weapon a bunch out of personal interest. Anyone watching who has actually played with them should feel free to comment the more minute details that I may not be able to get from my position at the very slightest, or if you have any opinions on the section about to begin, which is whether or not you think that this weapon should come back to the modern age Monster Hunter main series games. First off, for me, yes. Though I'd say that for most things. I play all 14 weapons currently in the main games, and if more were added, I would definitely play them too. I like playing weapons, I like playing Monster Hunter, I like playing Monster Hunter with the different weapons to see the different ways that it feels and the different experiences you can have. I see very, very little downside to adding weapons in a single player game as long as the developers are comfortable balancing it somewhat. Things don't have to be balanced perfectly. Again, single player game. Speedruns are a thing, and you want them to be somewhat balanced for that type of stuff and to make sure that some people aren't having that much harder of a time than others. But, you know, as long as they're close, it's alright. Single player game, guys. And as such, I will almost always say yes, just for my pure personal bias of wanting more weapons. But as far as actual mechanics of the Tonfa, I do worry it might be a step too much for modern Monster Hunter, at least. Just one mechanic too many, in my opinion. Long and short mode are fantastic. I love that a ton. The weakening parts by hitting them lots, making them glow, then doing one big finisher to make them explode is really absolutely awesome. I'm not sure that it needs the extra special effects when done on the head, body, or tail. The whole thing, like the Thunder Beetle effect, I think that we have that covered from other things now, so it doesn't necessarily need to come from this attack. It can just be a big damage pump. I think that'd be fun. And then the sort of combo gauge thing, I'm about 50-50 on. I know why it's there. It pushes you to be aggressive, but I personally am never really a massive fan of buffs that feel like they don't need to exist, if that makes sense. Longsword gauges make sense because you have to actively do a specific attack or combo to level them up. And then past that, you have options to spend your gauge levels these days too. Tonfa gauges, at least from my understanding of it, just sort of happen in the corner of your screen while you do normal combos to the monster. At least in most styles. The Frontier, where the Tonfas come from, also has a hunting styles system, like a very smaller scale version of hunting styles from Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate. And some people play a style that consumes some of your gauge to dash midair with short mode active. Other people play a mode that doesn't consume the gauge at all, and as long as your gauge is active, you just get a big damage buff. With the version that consumes the gauge a little bit to dash in the air, I can see it helping balance out the strength of the weapon, as it means that the timer to keep up your aggression also allows you to have the most evasive options. And I think this would probably be the best way to transfer this to the mainline games. Infinite air leaps would probably be the most enjoyable if they were, you know, actually able to balance the weapon around that. Oh my god, I'm dying. No, it's just a bubble in my throat. Oh, it's whoa, what's this? Oh, okay. Oh, no, it's a different bubble now. We could! It's more fun to have full control of your movement. So yeah, if they can balance it around you just being able to have infinite ones, yeah, of course I'd be happy with that. But I could definitely see it being easier for them to balance it as a weapon as a whole by including that gauge working that way. I'd say that I'd be happy to have the gauge, but I would definitely also be happy if they find a way to make it work without the gauge at all. So, the version that I am saying would be most likely to come if the Tonfas do come to mainline Monster Hunter games is the fun, quick, blunt damage moveset, long and short mode options and their normal effects. The way that you can change and flip the hit zones I think is really fun. The monster part weakening mechanic is cool, and then the dragon spirit piercing attack, which I personally think would be better without the secondary debuff effects in main series games, can do without the combo gauge, and that version version that I've just lined out there, I think is very in line with the type of weapons that we have in mainline Monster Hunter. We don't have any sort of particularly fast blunt weapon. The hunting horn is much faster than it used to be, but it's still not dual blades fast, you know what I mean? This would fit that slot perfectly. Of the 3 weapons that I'm talking about over the next few weeks, the Tonfas I think are the most logical one to be added to the roster of 14 weapons that we have currently already. They fill a hole that we have. They don't overlap too much with other people's jobs or playstyle. Obviously, they overlap with the way that aerial dual blades works in Rise. They overlap a bit with Insect Glaive. They overlap with a little bit of blunt stuff, and they can guard. But, you know, it's not too much. It has its own spot that it carves, and it's wonderful. And especially as the 5th gen that we've been in, the 5th generation of Monster Hunter, it seems to be trending more and more towards advanced mobility for the hunters. A weapon like Tonfas, with all of its aerial motion and dodging shenanigans, would definitely be a heavily enjoyed weapon if it comes to the main series. It would fit a lot with the way that our combat works in a game like Rise, for example. Of course, that's my personal opinion. That's why I've been talking about this to you guys today in the depth that I've been trying to, so you can try to form your own opinions and understandings of the Tonfas and know whether or not it's something that you would like to see again in the series. I've always said, Capcom is out there listening to this community. They have reacted to things that we have shown interest in before. If the community makes enough of an uproar, enough of an impassioned plea in favor of something like Tonfas, who knows what could happen? Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been a bit of a talk about the Tonfas and whether or not they should be brought into the main series Monster Hunter games. Are the Tonfas a weapon that you would consider playing if they did? If not, can you see any reason that it would negatively affect you to add a 15th weapon to the game in general? Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.